In this episode, I share 5 chilling stories from truck drivers who drive in the dead of night. These stories are not just make-believe, they're real and downright creepy and unsettling. Be warned. Story 1: Midnight Menace. As a female truck driver during my solo driving days, I once found myself on a delivery route in Memphis, Tennessee. The receiver kept me there for so long that I was held up for 7 hours. Time ticked away, forcing me to park at the far end of the TA Petro lot in West Memphis for my mandatory 10-hour break. It was pitch black out there. I took Noodles, my faithful dog, outside for a bathroom break. While I was walking him, I saw a man at the back of a trailer, just standing there watching me. My heart raced. I quickly led Noodles back to the truck, unease gnawing at me. After that, I got out of the truck and started walking to the store so I could order some dinner. So, I hurriedly rushed to get a seat at the bar before it could be taken. I ordered my food and waited for it to come. Halfway through my dinner, my bladder reminded me I needed to use the bathroom. So, I told the waitress I wasn't finished. I just had to go potty, and that I would be back. But upon return, something was off. For reference, I am left-handed, and always put my utensils on the left side of my plate. Alarm bells rang. Was that man here, or did someone tamper with my food? I looked around and didn't see the man that followed me inside, but I was freaking out at this point. I called the waitress over, still standing behind my chair, and asked if she messed with my food. She said no. I asked her if she saw anyone else messing with it, and she said she was too busy to have seen someone. She went and got the manager. I told the manager about the man that had creepily followed me to the store, then disappeared when I entered. He got me a new meal and moved me to the seat closest to the office. He went into the office and came back out a few minutes later and sat down in the booth across from me. And what he said next sent shivers down my spine. He said, "I looked through the camera feed, and a man did indeed come to where your food was setting while you were gone. He put something in your mashed potatoes, stirred it, and left back outside of the building. Unfortunately, we don't have any cameras in the truck lot, so I don't know where he went. I don't want you to leave the store alone, and I also need to report this to the police. Do you mind if I call them?" And I told him, no, I didn't mind. So, I sat there after I finished my meal and thanked him as he brought me a piece of pie on the house. It was delicious. When the police came, they took a report and searched the grounds for the man, but didn't find him. After a few hours in total, the police officer told me he would drive me back to my truck. Then told me that he was going to ask his boss if they could post a police officer out there all night to watch for the man. The boss man allowed it, and the entire night, there was a police officer parked in the deepest, darkest part of that lot, keeping watch. I was extremely grateful for this, because that unnerving, creepy guy seemed to have some evil intentions for me that night. Guys, just be careful when you decide to use the washroom at the restaurant. You never know who might be watching you. Story 2: The Miracle Mile. Growing up, my dad would share a bone-chilling story with me and my brothers, a story that has haunted me, especially during my tiresome, long drives when I feel a bit sleepy. I vividly recall the first time I heard it was after I asked him if angels were real. I was probably 7 or 8 years. He drove trucks decades ago, before I was born. and during the time when labor laws around limits and breaks were less stringent. He'd fairly regularly accept calls that would extend his shift to where he was driving 24, 36 hours, or even more hours without a break longer than a quick bathroom or fast food stop. My father had a keen mind for mathematics and delighted in turning the simplest of things into brain-teasing puzzles. Whenever we were driving around town, he'd regularly ask me things like how long it would take us to get from home to the store if we were going 30 miles per hour, but had to stop for 5 minutes in the middle because a family of kittens were crossing the road, etc. He'd come up with similar equations for himself during his long solo drives, using things he was seeing like the odometer readings, mileage markers, the time. And then he could test his speed based on the equation, etc. One particularly grueling night, after already having driven a long stretch, he found himself on a winding mountain road in the pouring rain. His eyelids grew increasingly heavy, and the usual tactics of rolling down the window and turning up the music didn't seem to be helping much. It was a rainy night on a pretty windy mountain road, without a shoulder to pull over safely. So he started doing those logic games out loud to keep alert and awake. He was saying something to the effect of, I just passed mile marker 146. So what time will it be when I reach 200 if I'm going 55 miles per hour? Then he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and felt his head do the nod jerk thing, which woke him up with a gasp. He opened his eyes, and to his horror, he was driving straight towards mile marker 158, which would have sent his whole truck tumbling down the steep mountain ravine. He was able to correct the course safely back, but it was a matter of seconds between that reality and certain death. For a long time, that chilling encounter left him with goosebumps and served as a reminder to always pull over and rest when feeling tired. My dad insists to this day that he slept through 12 miles of windy mountain road going 60 plus miles per hour, only to wake up just at the last moment between life and death. Each time he recounts this tale, his voice cracks with emotion as he concludes, I don't know if there's angels, but I know there's something bigger going on in this universe than our human brains have been able to understand yet. If I wouldn't have woken up at that critical moment, you kids wouldn't be here today, and that's something that feels pretty close to spiritual. Story 3. Highway Frights. Back in my younger days, I wasn't officially a long-haul trucker, but I had several jobs that had me driving all over the country. One of these jobs was shipping horses from barns to shows, and another was working as part of a road crew for a rock band. During that time, I was quite young, just between 16 and 20 years old. For reference, I am a short, athletic woman with distinct tattoos and a red mohawk, a combination that made me quite a standout at the many rests, stops, and gas stations I visited along my routes. On these drives, I came across many weird and eerie experiences. One place that always gave me chills was the Navajo Nation, which I somehow always ended up driving through at night. Another spooky area was northern Utah, which felt like something straight out of a horror movie. Anyways, to my first story, I was driving from Galveston, Texas, to New Orleans, Louisiana. Galveston had just been hit by a destructive hurricane, and there were unsettling rumors of a serial killer in the city. I had just crossed the border from Texas into Louisiana when I began feeling extremely tired. It was around 3 a.m., and I could really feel the exhaustion taking over. I was desperately looking for an open gas station to take a break and refuel, but all of them were closed. Finally, With no other option, I pulled into a closed station, parked in the far corner of the lot, killed my engine, a convertible Jeep at the time, and reclined my seat to catch some sleep. Everything seemed quiet. There were a few lights from the streetlights, but I parked far enough away that they couldn't really bother my eyes. Suddenly, I was jerked awake by a strong feeling that something wasn't right. You know, like my inner alarm bells were ringing. In the faint light, I noticed a figure that looked like a man slowly moving towards my car. He was covered in mud, dressed in ragged clothes, and was holding a metal piece that appeared like a knife. He was only about 5 feet away and moving slowly towards my car. Immediately, my thoughts raced to the serial killer, rumored to be on the loose. My heart raced, and I immediately turned on the engine. As I did, he growled deeply and charged at me. I managed to reverse just in time, narrowly missing the swing of his knife. With the headlights on, I could see he was covered in sores, and the knife was all rusty. I quickly sped out of there, too frightened to sleep again, until I reached New Orleans. The scary thought that he might have been watching me sleep haunted me for years. Since that experience, I've made it a point not to sleep in my car and haven't done so for years. My car was also a convertible. He could have easily cut his way in. On another trip, I was hauling horses from Kansas to Tucson, Arizona. It was late at night, around 2 a.m. near Gallup, New Mexico, when the back tire of my truck blew out. Stranded and alone, I realized I couldn't change the tire by myself. Since it was Easter Sunday morning, finding help was incredibly difficult. After many calls, a Native American couple who owned a tow service agreed to help me. They also had a place for the horses. They urgently warned me to stay inside the truck and keep the doors locked, emphasizing it in a way that made my skin crawl. Alone in the dark, I started hearing strange noises, a scratching sound at the back window, and the truck slightly swaying. Fear gripped me as I sat there, waiting in the darkness. When the couple finally arrived, they were quick to move me to their tow truck, efficiently dealing with my vehicle and the horses. They took me to their ranch, fixed my truck, and cared for the horses. As I was about to leave, a news report about a woman murdered on the same highway the previous night shook me to the core. Reportedly, she had been shot along the same highway while trying to change a tire. The couple's stern warning, the chilling news story, and their gift of protective potpourri for my truck instilled a deep sense of caution in me. Since then, I've always been extra careful, especially when driving through remote areas at night. These experiences have left an indelible mark on me, teaching me the importance of staying alert and aware in unfamiliar and potentially dangerous situations. Story 4. Midnight Trap. I used to transport urgent cargo across the vast plains in Minnesota. Late one night, around 2 a.m., I was crossing North Dakota, heading towards Montana. My cargo was a crucial tractor part urgently needed by a farm the next morning. While driving, I started experiencing highway hypnosis, a familiar feeling to me since I've made such journeys countless times. Anyone familiar with North Dakota knows its flatness and the straight, long roads that stretch out, making it relatively easy to spot objects on the road, even in the dead of night. On this particular stretch, something caught my eye. It was an obstruction spanning across my lane, about half a mile ahead. Initially, I thought it was debris, perhaps a tire shred, so I slowed down, ready to switch lanes. However, as I drew closer, a shocking realization hit me. It wasn't debris, but two people lying across the lane, positioned head to toe. I quickly swerved to avoid them, narrowly missing them, and brought my truck to an almost complete stop. But oddly, they didn't move. I contemplated backing up to check on them, but then I recalled a story an old-timer once told me. He mentioned that in remote areas, people sometimes lay in the road as a trap. When a driver stops, these individuals, along with accomplices hidden nearby, would attack the driver, rob them, and steal their vehicle, leaving them stranded in the middle of nowhere. With this story in mind, I decided against going back. As I shifted my truck back into gear to leave, the two figures got up and walked towards the road's shoulder. I reported the incident to the police, though given the remote location, I wasn't sure if it would lead to any action. Thanks to the wisdom shared by that experienced trucker, I kept my truck, my job, and avoided a potentially dangerous situation. Story 5. Stormy Night Terror. I've been driving every day and night for work for the past 4 years, though I'm not a truck driver by trade. My journey took me through a rural part of the Mississippi, between Clarksdale and Greenwood. This route is a 2-lane highway stretching 250 miles, and I was heading home. That night, the weather worsened as I left Clarksdale, with high wind advisories and a real threat of tornadoes in the Delta. I had just finished a long 14-hour workday, so after eating dinner and grabbing coffee to keep alert, I set off on the drive. Driving through flat farmland at night, especially for 100 miles, can be both exhausting and spooky. This feeling intensifies with inclement weather. About 30 miles into this farmland, I encountered a hailstorm, pelting my truck. In Mississippi, hail in July usually signals a tornado. Alone, with no lights or other vehicles in sight, I pulled over to look for the approaching storm. I rolled down the passenger window and shone my high-powered flashlight into the darkness, but saw nothing unusual. Turning to the driver's side, I was shocked to see a tall, extremely pale man with deeply sunken eyes and a disturbingly wide grin, his face pressed against my window. His grin revealed crooked teeth, reminiscent of the Cheshire Cat. I screamed in terror, and in an instant, he disappeared. I quickly drove off, shaken by the encounter. Our work vehicles are always equipped with running cameras for safety. Once I reached a safe spot, I called my wife, keeping the details of the hailstorm and the eerie figure to myself. I checked the footage from the cameras, but found no sign of the man. It made me question whether it was just my imagination. Since then, I've avoided driving through the Delta at night, unless absolutely necessary. A little about our vehicles. They're normal passenger vehicles, fitted with cameras and GPS, not subject to the same regulations as semis. I prioritize safety. If I feel tired, I'll stop and rest, even if it means getting a hotel. The flashlight I carry is no ordinary light. It's a telescoping floodlight, powerful enough to illuminate up to 1,000 feet. Having been caught in a tornado while in a vehicle before, I wanted to be sure I could spot a funnel cloud and seek safety if another tornado approached.